There we go. Now we're started. All right. So, welcome to the Aware Athlete Show. The Aware Athlete, connecting to the life you want. So, I want to remind everybody again, as I have been reminding you, that the word athlete in the original Greek means someone who is seeking for a prize. In fact, someone who is striving or wrestling for a prize of great personal value. That's all of us, I think. So in these interviews, we will be interviewing some people that I think are going to give you great information and help you along the way in seeking your own personal value and your own story. So I want to mention also that if you're interested in the interview series, please get onto Facebook and join the Aware Athlete group, and that way you'll be up to date on what's going on with the interview series in the future, and you'll be able to see either links to the interviews or some of the full interviews yourself. So please join the Aware Athlete Facebook group. And I'm also going to mention that if you want to delve more deeply into the subject of the Aware Athlete, the book is available on Amazon in 3 forms. It's available in Kindle, paperback, and also audio. And I might just briefly mention before I introduce our guest tonight that Almine actually wrote the foreword for the book. So there's another reason for you to go check it out. So tonight, we have a very special guest, Almine Barton. And Almine is many things. She is, by study and by trade, an acupuncturist. She is a CrossFit instructor, certified as a CrossFit instructor, and she is a multi-sport athlete. And by multi-sport, I don't mean somebody who just dabbles, but someone who actually is a serious practitioner of, I think it's Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Mm-hmm. And she's an avid rock and ice climber. So she's also a world traveler. And she is, what shall I say? She has a background in meditation. She is a medical anthropologist, and that is a story in itself. We might get into that. Maybe we won't. It's quite interesting. So, and anything that I can tell you about Almine is actually 2-dimensional. And after you meet our guest tonight, you'll know why. So, without any further words, Almine, say hi.
Hi. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So. You have a successful acupuncture business in Bend, and there was quite a bit of background that goes into that. So how did you get to where you are today, and how did you become who you are today, and how did you make your business so successful?
Oh gosh. Whoa, big questions. Let's see. Let's kind of start where, how I got into acupuncture, maybe.
Great. Yeah.
It is kind of a funny story. Mm-hmm. So I actually originally was an archaeology major in my undergrad. And the first 3 out of the 4 years of my undergraduate degree, I was doing archaeology. In fact, I was working on the Xunantunich project, which is right on the border of Belize and Guatemala. I was working under the auspices of Dr. Cynthia Robbins, who is an expert in Mopan Mayan culture. And it was a funded project via National Geographic. And I was kind of her coffee fetching girl. You know, all the undergraduate students really didn't get the important jobs. They kind of got the, counting the pottery shards and fetching coffee for the real archaeologists. And, so I was down there in the jungle in Central America.
What a picture. What a picture being down there in the jungle in Central America with, doing that archaeology work.
Yeah, yeah. And Dr. Robbins is just brilliant. Her understanding of Shunan Tanich, which is a very unique site in the Mayan kingdom. It was actually a matrifocal site. It was ruled by a queen, which was highly unusual. She was also a warrior queen. She went to battle a lot with the neighboring large pyramid in Guatemala called Tikal, which is quite famous. You see that pyramid in movies a lot, etc. But they were at war a lot, and it's quite a fascinating archaeological site. And it was a real privilege to work with her. So this is where it gets a little funny. Archaeologists are definitely a different breed. They are a weird group of people, and what ends up happening is they get drunk in large groups in the middle of nowhere in jungles a lot at night.
That sounds like a movie.
It's not as exciting as Indiana Jones movies, but it's more entertaining maybe.
Yeah.
So, basically you just have these archaeologists that are kind of in the middle of nowhere. And all they're dealing with pretty much most of the day are students and dead people. So they're really a unique group of individuals. And one night she was sitting there with me and she was just drunk off her melon. She's been drinking way too much tequila. And she looked at me and she said, Almine, you're not cut out for this life.
Oh, and I said, so she listened up and gave you some advice.
I said, well, I want to be an archaeologist. Mopan Mayan culture is my love. I love being down here. I love working with you. And she said, you don't want to end up like me. And I said, well, I think you have,
that's funny right there.
Yeah. I said, well, I think you have a pretty cool job. And she said, no, she said, you're going to end up in a lonely place drinking like me with dead people. So I said, well, if you had to do it over, what would you do? And she said, well, you seem to like the medical side of archaeology. So I was very fascinated with, so to speak, primitive diets of ancient people, how that affected population, prenatal, postnatal, gestational nutrition, and how that affected the tribe at large.
Yeah.
And she kind of leaned into me and she said, you should go into medical anthropology. And I said, really? And she said, yeah. She said, you still get to work with archaeologists, but it's more focused on the medicinal or the medical aspect of traditional people. And so she sent me home. That kind of was that. She sent me back to my college here in Oregon. That's where I did my undergrad at Marylhurst University. And she was like, bye, you don't belong here. You should go do medical anthropology. And so I basically finished up the last, it was more like a year and a half actually, of my undergrad doing medical anthropology. And a lot of that I spent in Peru and partially actually down in the Amazon.
Okay, that's really interesting. So
That's how that ended up.
So you actually had to get to know the people that, for instance, the Incas still have descendants.
Oh, yeah.
So you got to know the people that still represent the culture as well as delving into the history, or?
Yeah, and actually, it's very interesting because the Incan descendants were quite smart. They knew that the conquistadors were coming to ravage their culture, and they went up extremely high, basically where they were fairly untouchable. They were in the inhospitable Andes, and basically the genetic descendants of the Inca today are the Quechua, and they're up around what they now are terming the Altiplano, which kind of spans Bolivia and Lake Titicaca in Peru, which is around 16,000 feet.
Wow.
Yeah, they went high. So the conquistadors reached Cusco, which, I mean, I'd have to look it up, but that might be around like 9,000 something feet. But they didn't go all that much higher. So the Quechua basically just went higher and higher to avoid assimilation, and it worked.
Yeah, I'm sure the Spanish wouldn't have done very well at 16,000 feet at all.
No. And those mountains, I mean, you start getting up, past 10, 12,000 feet, it's formidable. I mean, it's impressive. You're sucking wind up there.
So I can already see a couple things here that I can relate to pretty strongly myself, is that you already have an analytical side and a very physical, natural side. You love being out in the jungle, and yet you like theory and history and those type, and knowing how things work.
I do. I actually have, I would say, a 50% nerd side of me. I like pie charts. I like graphs.
Yeah.
That's kind of the medical anthropologist side of me. Everything had to be quantitative, and it had to work for me to get a degree in that. And there was a lot of, well, let's see your proof. So that had to work out, as far as decimals and pie charts, and it was fun. I really enjoyed it. So I spent a good amount of time up on the Altiplano near Lake Titicaca. And then I actually ended up going down into the Peruvian Amazon, right at the headwaters of the Amazon, and studying down there.
Wow.
Yeah. Very different cultures, very different geography, very different plant life, very different nutritional profiles, very different. Peru is quite a fascinating country to do, I would say, any kind of anthropological research in. I mean, archaeology too, of course, but there's 80 microclimates alone in Peru for such a small country. I mean, it's drastic.
Yeah. I'd love to visit sometime. So what did you learn in studying natural diet and medical anthropology, and what did you learn that could help you with nutrition and health today?
That is a solid question. It has a big answer, but it's a solid question. I mean, I don't think to start as a 101 baseline beginning, to start by saying what most people now know is a good rule of thumb: stay away from refined sugars. Stay away from refined flours. They actually have a similar insulin response on your blood sugar as refined sugars, which is interesting because you think, oh, but it's a grain and it's good for me. Yeah. I mean, your body can't actually really tell the difference with the new hybridized grains. We're not looking at ancient grains anymore. We're not looking at kamut from Egypt or the original strain of, quinoa from Peru, which actually, by the way, is not a grain. It's botanically a seed, which is why it's generally hypoallergenic. However, the food today simply does not look like its nutritional ancestors. And so for people to say, oh, but I'm eating wheat bread, it's good for me, I get why they say that, because the marketing dollars behind that loaf of bread is substantial, but it actually is not at all the same as its ancestor. So your body actually rejects it like it would almost a pathogen, which is very interesting.
That is very interesting. In fact, I'm sure that none of our food has quite the nutritional value that it had a couple hundred years ago.
No, it does
particularly
not.
Those two things that you mentioned. Yeah.
I mean, those are just two good starting points. Stay away from refined sugars, stay away from refined flours.
Yeah. Not to get off the point, but I guess Dr. Weston Price traveled the world and came up with some of the same conclusions that you're talking about there.
Yeah, and actually his book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, is kind of the Bible of medical anthropology, really. I mean, a lot of my research as far as gestational nutrition, prenatal nutrition, and tribal collective population control, if you will, via infant death and birth and nutrition causes have a lot to do with his fat-soluble vitamin research that he did early on. I mean, he really was a pioneer. Yeah.
Okay. So now our listeners know to avoid refined sugars and grains. That's
Don't
good.
eat them.
That's good. That's good. Yeah. So that brings up a couple other things in my mind. But so moving along, how did you become a successful? A lot of people are interested in the business aspect. How did you become a successful acupuncturist in Bend? How did you take that background that you had already? Well, of course, you studied for several years too. Acupuncture.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really think there is a glossy answer to that. It is an enormous amount of work. I mean, I work a lot.
Yeah.
I'm going now on 13 years, doing my job. I love my job. But it also has taken some level of education to the athlete demographic in Bend as to how and why Chinese medicine and acupuncture can be useful in their injury rehab protocols and or in their recovery protocols for sports.
Yeah.
So when I moved here a decade ago, I called everyone in the book that was a colleague, and I asked them, I said, are you treating the specific demographic of athletes in Bend? And 99% of them said, no, I'm just doing general family practice. Like whoever walks in my door is my new patient. And I have always felt like, know what you're good at, be humble to know what you don't know and what you're not good at. And I'm good at like 3 things, I think, with Chinese medicine. And that's post-op recovery and post-op rehab care. That's sports injury care and pain management. Now, I do have kind of a weird quirk on the side, which it just kind of found me. I didn't find it, but I do have a weird knack with Chinese medicine, acupuncture, and labor induction. So I do occasionally get the privilege of helping a little one enter the world.
Wow.
And I do get more and more referrals just via word of mouth. I don't advertise that I do that, on any kind of ad or anything. But I've gotten, several OBGYN referrals just this year alone. So, that's just fun for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether you ever think you're going to go back to Peru or not. What do you think about that?
Oh God, I would love to. Of course it would be more of a vacation or a visiting situation, but I mean, I could easily live in Peru. It's actually I've been to many countries, and it's one of very few countries that I could say, no, I could live there. I mean, genuinely. I've hiked the Inca Trail twice, and it's truly life altering. Like there is something to trekking through just large, humbling, majestic mountains that creates a pilgrimage.
Yeah.
Whether you started off with the intent of doing a pilgrimage or not, you end up having done a pilgrimage. And I experienced that in the Himalaya as well, but more so in the Andes.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the sports that you're interested in.
Yeah.
This relates to the question that we just asked, because that was quite an adventure being down there in Peru, and the Amazon. Just the thought of just say the word Amazon River, and it already sounds a little scary.
Yeah, I mean, I can truly say I think it's probably one of the top 3 or 4 most mind-blowing places I've ever seen. I mean, that takes a lot for me to say that. I mean, it is another world down there, like 180 degrees different from where you and I are sitting right now. It's very fascinating, from the geography to the wildlife to the plant life to the people and their belief systems. I mean, it's truly exotic. That is the word. Yeah. Yeah,
it about did in Teddy Roosevelt, I think. Yes, trip.
I didn't know he went down there.
What's that?
I'm sorry. I barely heard you there, but I didn't know he went down there.
Oh, he did. After he was one of a kind. I mean, after he was president, he did a major expedition down the Amazon.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And I think he got malaria. I don't think he ever really was the same.
Oh, wow.
But he was that kind of guy. And
Wow.
so already you're talking about adventure, because different cultures, monster crocodiles, piranha, dense jungle that you can't find your way out of because one tree looks the same as another, huge snake. Yeah.
That is true. And I actually did see a man get his forefinger completely bit off by a piranha.
Really?
That was an experience I did have. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Well,
I wouldn't recommend it, but I'm just saying I've had it.
yeah. Monster bugs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hypothermia inducing rains.
Yes. That's
Yeah.
all true. That's all
But-
accurate.
So this leads into a subject that the sports that you love: ice climbing,
Yeah.
rock climbing, maybe some free climbing in there. You're usually
Don't tell my mom.
yeah. And you are an adventurer at heart.
I hope so. I hope so.
So I'll ask you a silly question.
No silly questions.
You're never afraid of anything, are you?
I am pretty much scared every day.
Yeah, that's I think that's what adventure is about, partly. What do you think?
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm pretty much scared every day. And I think I keep doing what I do because I don't like the fact that I'm scared every day. I don't like it.
Really?
Yeah. Which is kind of interesting. Like,
So-
I mean, there hasn't been one day that I haven't walked into a jiu-jitsu class, or there hasn't been one day that I haven't roped up and looked at whatever I'm about to climb and thought, I'm scared out of my gourd right now.
Yeah.
Like, especially with climbing. I mean, there can be life or death, you know, there's consequences.
Right.
There's very little room for error. And, you know, you have to be 100% on and focused. And if you're doing like, you know, a long multi-pitch route, you know, you bonk up there, you get hypoglycemic, you get thirsty, you feel fuzzy-headed from climbing and, you know, doing such an endurance push and being out in the elements. If it's hot outside, you're getting sunburnt. I mean, all those things like affect your focus and you can't let them.
Yeah.
You know, and with ice climbing, I mean, there's only one rule in ice climbing, and that's don't fall.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean, rock, you don't want to fall. Ice, you do not want to fall. There is no room for error. So with rock climbing, there's minor wiggle room. With ice climbing, there's no minor wiggle room at all.
No, you can stand on ice. I could run on an ice skating rink, but ice in a slope, no way. If you don't have if you don't have the right equipment and know what you're doing, ice in a slope, it's impossible. So you have to really know what
It's scary.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, I don't sugarcoat that stuff because there's something weird that I have figured out about myself, and maybe this doesn't apply to other people, but if I can name the demon, so to speak, if I can say, I am really scared right now, it tends to dissipate.
Right. Yeah.
It's weird. And
Yeah.
I mean, I train, as far as jiu-jitsu is concerned, with the most respectful, kind, safe, amazing training partners. And that doesn't mean I'm still not scared to death, because I'm putting myself in a situation that my entire life I was told not to get in.
Yeah.
You know, especially as a woman. I mean,
Right.
it's true. Like, I wasn't taught as a little girl to have large men choke me out and suffocate me. I was I was
Yeah,
taught
no,
to
not too many
do
people
everything.
teach their kids that.
Yeah. I mean, from a self-defense perspective, I was taught to not get in packs of men and not get myself in a quote threatening position with large men or men, period. And that's what I choose to do on my lunch break in between patients 5 days a week. And
Yeah.
it's scary as hell. I mean, it really is. And it doesn't even matter, I don't think, that you necessarily trust your jujitsu partners. It's a fight or flight cortisol response. It's a survival response
Yeah.
that you are placing yourself in.
Right. Because you're doing a lot of just plain learning in jujitsu, but you're in an experiential situation where you're experiencing things that sometimes, my very limited experience with martial arts, extremely limited, but when somebody hits you, that's an emotional thing.
It is.
Yeah. So you're really in an experience there that goes beyond just what we normally consider learning. It is real learning.
I'm blatantly honest about it. I probably cry in my car after class 1 to 3 times a month, and it has nothing to do with my training partners. It's because, well, there's several things to that, but one of them is if you get choked out or you get armbarred or whatever, there is an emotional response that happens in your body of, I was defeated, I was
Yes.
panicked for 1 second when it happened.
Yeah.
Like, it does bring up very primal, raw, visceral survival mode responses.
I was defeated or I was humiliated. I mean, that's an emotional response, not just, not just thinking those.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. It doesn't feel good to get into that position of weakness, even being hit.
No. And, one of my professors who I have just a really lovely, spiritual, heartfelt connection with, he said to me, I sense that you have more fear in jujitsu than even climbing, because with climbing, you're walking the razor's edge, right? You cannot mess up.
Yeah.
He said, so I can see it in your eyes when you do jujitsu, you have a fear of messing up. And he said, part of that is because you've climbed for so long that if you mess up, there's consequence and it's not good.
Yeah.
So there is that piece of jujitsu that is such a teacher to me that I have to allow myself to fail.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Almine, I am just enjoying the heck out of asking you these questions. But we're going to be able to generalize this a little bit for our listeners if they haven't already done it for themselves. But so what you have to do when you're climbing, well, there's a number of things. First off, it wasn't too long ago that I had another realization that I'm not the only one who has insecurities.
No.
And I was in
we're all one big walking insecurity, for real.
And if we realize that, what a lesson.
Yes. And how marvelous it is, because it actually, I think, allows you to connect with other people in a very authentic way.
Yeah.
Like, you almost become less insecure by knowing you have an insecurity, because you're like, oh, okay, it's there.
Yeah.
All right.
So it's part of the human experience and not just your experience and my experience. And
correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then here's another thing that I know that in your pursuits, well, in jiu-jitsu, I'm sure that you have people that you really respect and you trust to a great extent.
Mm-hmm.
And some of your climbing partners also. But you're placing yourself in a situation, you get hit, you get choked out, whatever. But you have to be resilient. So you're placing yourself in a situation that doesn't exclude a wonderful relationship with other people, but it means you have to look inside yourself for your own response, for your own social strength. In other words, something has to come from you. You can't get it all from other people. So you're placing yourself in that situation where you have to trust yourself a little bit too.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, this is kind of a different show in and of itself, but I wrote a blog post on why some people are wired to need sport with consequence.
Yeah.
Very interesting, right? I mean, like, if you're looking at what they're now terming extreme sports athletes, from base jumpers to, big wall climbers in Yosemite to, it goes on and on for a list. But there are some athletes, and I happen to be one of them, that need to have that feedback loop of consequence that teaches them rapidly what they can and can't do.
Yeah.
And that is a wiring in the brain that is very interesting. They've been, pouring more money into doing studies on that. Nobody, I think, knows for sure why and how the brain works as far as needing that level of cortisol spike. But, they have done like MRIs on Alex Honnold, who free soloed El Cap and Half Dome, ropeless, etc.
Yeah.
And, I think that all that's kind of expounded upon in the movie Free Solo about him. But it's actually very interesting. If you look over evolution, people think that we're having to deal with more stress than maybe our ancestors did.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I agree with that.
No, it's a different kind of, I
Right.
definitely wouldn't say it's more.
No. And so what's very interesting is that I think personality types like me are probably, they think, deficient in dopamine levels. And so you actually put yourself in situations that have consequence to get almost kind of a dopamine rush that way back when your ancestors had in spades.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting.
There's just primal things about life that we're just so cut off from.
Yeah. And so I think, like, for instance, is it nature versus nurture? It's kind of interesting because I have two siblings and they have zero inclination to do what I do. I mean, they just kind of are just like, whoa, where did you come from?
Yeah.
As far as like my propensity towards extreme sports, adrenaline rushing activities type of thing. But they have and are starting to do more and more studies on athletes that crave that quote rush.
Yeah.
And what is neurologically, chemically, and emotionally going on inside of them. And the bottom line is, it is an addictive personality type. Like I can openly say I'm addicted to the rush of adrenaline sports.
Mm-hmm.
That's an addict.
So,
that's an addict.
Well, I suppose so. I know someone who, you know the name too, but I don't have to mention her, but was a heroin addict.
Oh, sure. Oh yeah. She's a good friend of mine. Right.
Yeah.
Who's now
and became
one of the top ultra runners in the world.
So it's just a healthy expression of who she is now.
Well, it's fascinating because if anybody out there is more interested in this topic, I highly recommend reading the book Positive Addiction, because basically it tells parents how to spot children early on that have kind of addictive personalities like mine, who need to have some kind of repetitive rush feedback biomechanism to feel well and to feel healthy. And those kids, including my personality type, I think walk a fine line. I think if they don't find an outlet for that via athletics, via what have you, that it actually can go dark and it can get very addictive in the wrong types of ways, drugs, alcohol, etc. And if you talk to some of the world's top extreme sports athletes, they'll tell you that they used to be, as a teenager, a meth addict, like our mutual friend. They used to be an alcoholic, and then they found climbing, or they found jujitsu, or they found whatever martial art, or kiteboarding now. I mean, whatever it is. But the bottom line is, you have to own you have an addictive personality. And then once you are able to, again, name the demon, right? You can say, which fork in the road do I want to go down with this specific personality type? Do I want to go down a dark road? Or do I want to channel this into one or more sports where maybe I can inspire somebody to move their body. Maybe I can inspire, like our mutual friend who went from being a meth dealer to ending up in jail to having her mom and her sister die of meth to becoming now one of the world's top female ultra runners. I mean, that's how this works, right? So it's interesting because when I was a teenager, I absolutely could sense inside of me that I had a penchant for pushing the envelope.
Yeah.
Right?
That's cool that you were aware of that so early. Yeah.
Well, I think I was self-aware of it, which I'm grateful for, but my dad also sat me down and said, I'm not worried about my other two kids, but you have trouble all over you.
Wow.
Like written all over you. So what do I need to do to support your process? Yeah, he saw it in me really early on. And what's I think very interesting as well, and I mean, here's maybe the nature portion of the genetics aspect of it. Every middle child, which I am, on my dad's side of the family dies of alcoholism.
Wow.
Right? So let's look at that addictive personality piece. So he kind of saw, I think, signs in me early on that I kind of had an addictive type of nature. Like I did weird things as a kid. Like I wouldn't be obsessed with climbing a tree once. I would be obsessed with doing it 50 times, like very OCD style. Like my parents were like, you climbed the tree, be good with it. Like, come on inside. And I'm like, no, I have to make it to 50. And they're like, well, why? You know, like who cares?
Yeah.
But it is that OCD type of personality that keeps me going back 5 days a week to jujitsu, even if I just had my butt handed to me the day before. I always get up the next day and I'm like, no, that's not acceptable. Like
that is resilience. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that also is the makings of a good climber. I mean, you don't always get from bottom to top in your first try. I mean, you might project a route for a year.
Hopefully you don't get from bottom to top on your first try.
Right. I mean, that's kind of the goal of every climber, right? Is to what they call free the route, which is getting from bottom to top on the first try without falling. But
if you happen to do that, you probably wouldn't have learned very much.
Exactly. So there's that element again of the constant feedback loop of failure and then these huge highs of success and then these huge drops in failure. And Chris Sharma, who's the world's best sport climber, I mean, he's put up the hardest routes in the world for sport climbing. I love what he represents because in his video King Lines, he talks about the very, for lack of a better term, bipolar or these massive extremes that go through a climber's emotional psyche when they take these huge 100-foot falls and then, you know, they end up getting lowered and going, shit, here we go again. I got to go back up this bastard. You know? Like there is some kind of high though that is registered in the brain for those massive extreme emotional fluctuations that come with things like combat sports and extreme sports.
Yeah And a lot of people will run a 100-mile race and they'll say, I'm never doing that again, but in a couple of weeks there's another one. And I remember as a kid running so hard that I laid on the grass and I said, I am never going to run again, but in a couple of days
and here you are. Still running like an awesome, inspiration to all of us.
Oh, thank you. But so I would still like to walk the Pacific Crest Trail 2,600 miles. It's going to take another year before I have the time, but I don't have to do that. I have friends that are younger than I am that retire and they drink beer and eat pizza. But
Scott, it's you are an inspiration to all who know you. Seriously, I mean, age regardless. You really walk a beautiful talk in your life.
Oh, that's meaningful to me. I'm having so much enjoyment from this interview, and you know, I get nervous before I do them, but then they turn out to be such a blessing. because I'm being blessed,
Oh.
and I know that other people that listen to this are going to be blessed. So here's what I believe, that there are extreme personalities that are a little bit louder than some other personalities. Maybe somebody's got a quiet way of living, but
Totally.
but we can generalize that.
It's true.
What's really addictive is ego.
Yes.
And I don't mean learning or enjoying something, not that, but kind of getting addicted to anything that's worthless.
And you know, it's so funny because I think it was Sir Edmund Hillary that was, you know, who was kind of one of the pioneering mountaineers, that where somebody asked him, they said, why do you climb a mountain? Like, what's the point? And he said, why not?
Yeah, that's the answer. Yeah.
Right? I mean, I always tell, you know, my patients that, you know, are injured, you are passing time the same way as somebody else who's sitting on the couch with a remote control.
That's right.
You're passing the exact same 24
That's
hours.
right.
So
That's right.
what are you going to do with it?
That's right. So don't we have to use ourselves up doing something?
I think so.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Yeah. I mean, hell yeah, right? Like what? So my dad always says this to me, and he's just kind of my wisdom sage in my life. You know, he's 71 years old. He swims 6 days a week. He lifts weights 2 days a week. He runs on the beach. He loves his bike. You know, he's a hell of a go-getter. He refuses to retire.
Yeah.
He still works 40 hours a week at 71. He loves it. And what he always says to me is, kiddo, pick your hard. Pick your hard. In other words, I tell my patients this. I'm like, there's two hards out there. You can be obese and overweight and have type 2 diabetes and have complications from that and have chronic pain, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Or you can go and run something that's at your limit, or climb something that's at your limit, or, you know, do martial arts, which, you know, has, you know, many benefits. But I mean, that's the point, right? Is that like running is hard, martial arts is hard, climbing is hard, insert whatever sport you want to is hard, or you're going to experience the other kind of hard, which is illness, degeneration, pain. So pick your hard, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. You know, my dad used to say something about, you know, you're going to have to work for the rest of your life, so why not pick something you want to work at? But at the time, I didn't really understand it. But recently, my wife said to me, she said, you know, if you could do anything, or no, in fact, she just said it very simply. She said, what do you really want to do? And that transcended, you know, I like to think about things, you know, plan them out, or just think about the principles behind them and things like that. But that transcended conscious thought. So just what do you want to do? And then,
dads are cool and wives are cool.
Yeah. And so I realized that I want to walk the Pacific Crest Trail. And then so now I know, she said that, and I said, and now I know, you know, I'm going to turn 70 in a year. So I can either do what I want to do and say whatever it takes, you know. I mean, it's always enjoyable, even though, you know, you're going to run out of water in the desert, and you're going to have foot problems, and you're going to say, why am I out here, and all of that. But,
yep, totally.
So now I know if I just do that, something positive and a blessing to others will come out of just doing that. It's not logical. Just have to do it.
It's not logical.
And once you transcend logic a little bit, you're on the right path, I think. And
I think so.
But now we come to another point, a transitional point here. So now you know what you really want to do. Now you have to do it, or you're going to die having done nothing. So now you have,
that's heavy. Yeah, that's
now you have not only what you want to do, but you have what you must do. You have a responsibility to do. I haven't seen the movie, the Avengers movie.
I haven't either.
But I saw the trailer, and they very emotionally say, whatever it takes. And I thought that was awfully profound.
Mm.
So anyway, so now there isn't just a what do you want to do, which is actually that's essential, and that you could say that's all there is. But there's also a responsibility to do it.
Right.
Which leads me into another question I might ask you, and that is, so in your upbringing, your dad saw who you were and encouraged you to be that way, and you have, and I say this with the greatest respect, you have a little bit of an irreverent, rebellious streak. And I say
totally. Oh God, I'm so happy you said that.
Because otherwise, if we don't have that, then we have the real conformist streak.
I agree.
Now, it's okay to conform to some things because we're not anarchists. Right. But we've got to be willing to step out and change them too. So that's another thing. We know what we should do. We know also what we have a responsibility to do. And you've used these words recently about speaking your truth. So
dangerous territory.
What's that?
Speaking your truth is dangerous territory because you kind of, metaphorically speaking, make yourself, how would I put this? You make yourself susceptible to bullets, i.e. people's opinions, i.e. people's words. I mean, especially with the power of social media, you post one thing, it can go out to the entire world. Yeah. And so then you are highly susceptible and vulnerable to other people's opinions and perspectives on what you just said, if you care.
Yeah. And
right?
I think we all care to some extent.
I think we all do, but I can say I don't feel like it's any different than any other discipline that one might endeavor in their life, from lifting weights to going out and running. It is a diligent practice to actively realize you can take nothing personally. And that does, I think, become easier and easier with more practice.
Yeah.
It's a discipline. It's a practice to go, this actually has nothing to do with me. Whatever this person is saying, it might be valid, it might be accurate, it might be inaccurate, but at the end of the day, it has nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
And that is something you have to be diligent about if you're going to put yourself out there with any type of overt, perspective or opinion, or be kind of more public about your persona.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's vulnerable. It's scary for a lot of people. Yeah. And I get it.
Yeah, it is. It is.
It's not for everyone.
Yeah.
It's not. I think you have to be a very specific personality type to be willing to kind of take bullets, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does.
I think you have to be a little irreverent.
You have to, Almine, yeah. And that's, you're such a blessing that way, actually.
I don't know, man. That's guns or knives. It could go either way.
So, you've actually told our listeners how to be resilient, how to keep learning, how to apply yourself, how to be so involved in the world. A lot of lessons. So there was a quote that I think I sent you. I don't need to read it, but the world is in a state where it does need people to be change makers. And
I agree.
And would you like to tell us a little bit about some of the things that you advocate for, or work to help others in, or mentor in, or?
Not being a mother, I still do feel a responsibility to pass down what I know to youth. And so I have been active with various nonprofits like Girls Go Outside, which is sponsored and funded by REI, the Women's Wilderness Institute. I've always tried to advocate for young girls getting into self-defense, martial arts, jujitsu. I've contributed to the Girls and Geese Scholarship Program, things of that nature, because it's not that I don't want to help little boys. That's not the case at all.
Right.
But I think little girls need to learn how to say no earlier without guilt or shame. And I feel like if little girls learned how to say the word no earlier in their life, a lot of things could be prevented. If they had better set boundaries in their life and not feel bad about it. I think there's a pretty solid stigma with the word bitch that is often slapped onto it as kind of this sort of makeshift label for a woman that says, no, I don't want to do that. Or no, actually, you can't talk to me that way. Or no, you can't treat me that way. Automatically kind of that bitch label gets slapped on her. And I feel like the less that women, adolescent teens, and young girls feel bad about saying no, the less peer pressure they're going to feel from outside influences. And I feel like that can only be a good thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So,
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like everybody needs to have one or more causes that they are passionate about. Some people are passionate about vaccines. Some people are passionate about saving the whales. Some people are passionate about fracking. Some people are passionate about recycling. And I feel like if you pick 1 to 2 things in this world that you can lobby for, that you can be a voice for, I really kind of feel like that's all you need to do. I feel like people don't do anything because they get so overwhelmed with all of the things in the world that need fixing. But I just tell, excuse me, let me just get some water here.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I just tell my patients who come in with what they almost call empathy burnout. It's a new syndrome that counselors, psychologists, etc., have labeled and named since our most recent election. Since our most recent election, people have felt not heard as a population. They have felt helpless, like we're watching this clown show go on, and what can we do about it?
Yeah.
And what I tell them is, you don't really need today to figure out what to do about the goings on in the White House. If you can figure out what to do about the recycling in your local neighborhood, somebody's got to care about that.
Yeah.
Right? So I just say, pick 1 to 3 causes so that you don't feel overwhelmed and overworked and, get emotional or empathetic burnout from, trying to help others so much without replenishing yourself, and call it good.
Right.
And everybody's got to be passionate and a little fiery about something, I think.
Right.
Otherwise, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
I mean, my dad used to say that to me. He used to say, you know what? I want you to get fired up about 1 or 2 things that are happening in the world that doesn't sit well with you. Because otherwise, if you're just walking around breathing the air, you're kind of taking up space. Right? Like you're just existing. You're not really living. And living to me means that you make an impact on future generations, kind of that Iroquois Confederacy perspective of think 7 generations ahead.
Yeah.
If you can do 1 or 2 things in this world, I don't care what it is. I don't care if you're saving koala bears in Australia. Good for you. Somebody's got to.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, somebody's got to save the endangered, maruba tree in Brazil. Somebody's got to. So pick 1 or 2 things, get fired up about it, write your letters, contribute your nonprofit donation dollars, pick it, do whatever you want to do, but then call it good so you don't get overwhelmed or burnt out.
Yeah. Yeah, I really think that people developing their own gifts and taking their own responsibilities like that is the whole secret to a better world.
I agree. And I feel like a lot of people aren't doing anything at all because it just seems so overwhelming, right? It just, you're just like, oh my gosh, where do I even start? There's so many issues that are blatant, that are tear-jerking, that just rip the heart out. I mean, all you have to do is just read the news.
Right. So we have I've spent most of my life walking around hearing the news and not doing a whole lot about it. And so we have these hard hearts.
Well, and
we're calloused with it.
I agree. And I feel like I just posted something actually right before this interview. I feel like we've created walls around ourselves to protect ourselves from suffering, because what we see in this world is so mean, and it's so painful, and it's so unjust, and it's so uncompassionate that we almost have to create this kind of emotional armoring around us to kind of walk around and pay the bills and get our daily lives done. Otherwise, how would we function?
That's right.
But
That's right.
I feel like there's also this spectrum of like, I get what I call survival. You have to put up some walls so that you can get in your car and go about your day and pay your bills and treat your patients. But then as far as loving and being loved and feeling empathy and compassion towards other beings in this world, there are some walls you do have to tear down. Yeah, you do. I think we have to realize that we're all frail human beings, and very frail,
and we're not so different from any other human being. So we don't have to have all the labels, and we don't have to have all the judgment that we have, because everybody else is probably doing the best they can today, and with what they're facing.
Yeah.
And people talk about climate change, which I think is a really important issue.
I agree.
But how are we going to solve it? It's not how we're going to solve it. It's who we're going to be to solve it, I think. Just like
I agree. I agree 100%. I feel like climate change is going to almost require some massive overhaul of humanity to come together.
Yeah.
That is beyond border, that is beyond walls, that is beyond anything, for us to literally survive as a species.
Yeah.
I truly believe that.
I do too. It's a bigger test than just what technology are going to bring to bear.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think building more walls is not the answer. I think better dialogue is the answer. I think more politicians who have the people's best interest at heart, that might be easier said than done. But I think right now, as far as a evolutionary step, we're kind of in the spin cycle right now.
Yeah, we are.
Right? That's how I look at this. We're in the spin cycle. I think things are going to mellow out at some point. I don't know if that's going to be in my lifetime, but I think that new systems and new paradigms are going to have to be created for us to literally survive. I don't know if I'm going to get to see them in my lifetime. It would be cool if I did, but I'm optimistic, yet I just kind of go, maybe it is 7 generations down the line.
Yeah, the 7 generations, there's a number, and I've heard people say 4 or 5 generations it takes to make a change. Yeah.
Oh.
So, Almine, this has been wonderful.
Friend, thank you.
This has been very wonderful.
Oh, Scott, it is always a pleasure working with you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So you've, as people listen to this, and we'll have the recording out, I'll send you the recording file if you'd like.
Oh, sure. Thanks.
Yeah. I can transfer that to you on WeTransfer within a day. And I hope a lot of people listen to this, because they're going to get a lot out of it, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Scott. I love your show, and I look forward to listening to future guests, hopefully 1 or 2 that I've recommended. I hope that
I did make a contact with one you recommended, and he said he would be interested, so we'll see when we can work that out.
Yeah, he's great. He's brilliant. Brilliant man. So with outstanding perspectives and credentials behind him. So I think you'd be a great guest. But thank you so much for having me on.
It was wonderful. And this show just kind of came about because I realized all I'm going to do is be in the outdoors, see where that leads, and talk about it and talk about the things that are important regarding nature, regarding being an aware athlete, regarding finding your own gifts and using them. And so the show just kind of happened. So hopefully we can carry it along. So
I love it. I love your goal of the PCD. I mean, that's just an amazing goal. I mean, I've had several friends that have done it, from fast packing it to actually walking it. And I mean, I just hear it's life altering. And like I said, I hike the Inca Trail. It's not as long by any stretch of the means, but it is that metaphor of the pilgrimage.
It is.
You really are changed.
Yeah, it is. You have to learn what nature's rhythms are out there because every section's a little bit different.
Oh, yeah. From what I hear, yes.
Yeah.
Great.
Out there really briefly the other day, and the UV index was it was 9 out of 10, I think. And I was so surprised because the temperature wasn't hot, but did that suck the water out of you? Wow.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, that was wonderful. I will send you the recording, and thank you so much for doing that. I'm going to go ahead and take us off of Facebook and end the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Almine.
Thank you so much, Scott. Anytime. I feel like you and I could do 10 shows.
Oh, with you could do 10 shows? I'll have you.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like there's so many different fun topics to talk about that it's really endless.
You're absolutely right about that, and I'll have you on again.
Oh, well, thank you. I look forward to it.
All right. So good night.
Good night. Thank you.